Jake Collins stood at the large window of the spaceship horizon's edge and watched the stars move past them in bright streaks of light. He had been working on this ship for 3 years now as the person who studied alien life forms. His job was to learn about new creatures and plants they found on different worlds. Most days were quiet and peaceful, but today felt different. Captain Lisa Harper walked up to him with a serious look on her face. She held a small device that glowed with blue light. Jake had never seen anything like it before, and he could tell by her expression that something important was happening. "Jake, we just got a message from the Galactic Council," she said in a low voice. "They want us to go to something called the Crystalline Convergence. It happens only once every 50 years, and this time humans have been invited for the first time." Ever, Jake turned away from the window and looked at her with surprise. The Galactic Council was made up of the most powerful alien races in the galaxy. Humans were still new to space travel compared to these ancient civilizations. Most of them had been exploring the stars for thousands of years, while humans had only been doing it for about 100 years. "What exactly is this convergence?" Jake asked as they walked toward the bridge of the ship. Captain Harper touched the blue device, and it showed a hologram of a beautiful planet covered in crystal structures that reached up into the clouds. "It takes place on Nexus Prime, which is a neutral world where all the different alien species can meet safely. The most powerful rulers and leaders come together to discuss important matters that affect the whole galaxy." Jake felt excited, but also nervous. He had studied many different alien species in books and computer files, but he had never actually met any of them face to face. The idea of being in the same room with beings who could destroy entire planets or create new stars was both thrilling and terrifying. The journey to Nexus Prime took 2 weeks. During this time, Jake spent most of his hours reading everything he could find about the different species that would be at the convergence. There were the Metallic Brotherhood, who had bodies made of living metal, the gas dancers who existed as clouds of colored smoke, the Time Weavers who could see into the past and future, and many others that seemed impossible to believe. But the one that interested him most was Queen Zarathiel of the Voidborn Empire. Nobody knew much about her or her people. They controlled 17 different star systems and had never lost a war. Some said they could exist in multiple dimensions at the same time. Others claimed they were made of pure energy and could take any shape they wanted. What everyone agreed on was that Queen Zarathiel had never shown interest in any other species. Before when they finally arrived at Nexus Prime, Jake could hardly believe what he saw. The planet was covered in massive crystal towers that sparkled like diamonds in the light of 3 different suns. Ships from hundreds of different worlds filled the sky around the planet. Some looked like giant insects. Others appeared to be made of liquid metal that flowed and changed shape as they moved. The horizon's edge landed at a spaceport that was bigger than any city Jake had ever seen. As they walked out of their ship, Jake saw his first real aliens. A group of tall blue creatures with 4 arms each were standing nearby. Their skin looked like it was covered in tiny scales that changed color as they moved. When they noticed Jake looking at them, they made sounds like music and nodded their heads in what seemed like a friendly greeting. Captain Harper led Jake and 2 other crew members toward a huge building in the center of the Crystal City. The building was so tall that Jake could not see the top of it even when he looked straight up. As they got closer, he saw that the walls were not solid, but were made of some kind of energy that moved like water. Inside the building was the largest room Jake had ever seen. The ceiling was so high that clouds were floating near the top. Thousands of different alien beings filled the space. Some walked on legs like humans. Others floated in the air. A few seemed to be made of light itself and moved like living rainbows across the floor. At the center of the room was a raised platform where the most important leaders sat. Jake could see beings that looked like they were made of rock, sitting next to creatures that appeared to be giant flowers. In the very center of the platform was an empty space that seemed to bend the light around it. "That is where Queen Zerathil will appear," Captain Harper whispered to Jake. "Nobody knows exactly when she will arrive, but when she does, everyone will know it." They found seats near the back of the huge room with other representatives from younger civilizations. Jake noticed that many of the older alien species seemed to look down on the newer ones. Some would not even look in their direction. The ceremony began with music that came from instruments Jake had never imagined. The sounds seemed to come from inside his head rather than through his ears. Different leaders stood up to speak about trade agreements and territorial disputes. Jake tried to follow along, but much of it was too complex for him to understand. Then suddenly, the entire room became quiet. The temperature dropped, and Jake could see his breath in the air. A dark spot appeared in the empty space at the center of the platform. The spot grew larger and began to swirl like a whirlpool. Sparks of light danced around the edges, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with power. Queen Zerathil emerged from the swirling darkness like a figure stepping out of a dream. Her body seemed to be made of crystal that constantly shifted between solid and transparent. Light moved through her form in patterns that hurt to look at directly. She was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. She floated above her throne without touching it, and her voice filled the entire room without her seeming to speak. Jake felt the words inside his mind rather than hearing them with his ears. She began to address the assembled leaders about matters of cosmic importance. But then something unexpected happened. As Queen Zerathil spoke, her glowing eyes moved across the crowd of thousands of beings. When her gaze reached the section where Jake was sitting, everything changed. Her crystalline form suddenly became solid, and her ethereal voice stopped in the middle of a sentence. Every creature in the massive room turned to see what had caught the attention of the most powerful being in the galaxy. Jake felt those incredible eyes looking directly at him, and he could not move or breathe. The queen slowly descended from her floating position and began walking toward him. The crowd parted before her like water, and Jake could hear the whispers and gasps of thousands above. Different voices. Captain Harper grabbed his arm, but he barely noticed. Queen Zerathil stopped directly in front of him, and her voice rang out clear and strong for everyone to hear. "This human belongs to me." Jake opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was completely speechless. The words that Queen Zerathil spoke echoed through the massive hall like thunder. Jake could feel every single alien being in the room staring at him, and he still could not find his voice. His heart was beating so fast that he thought it might burst from his chest. Captain Harper stepped forward quickly and positioned herself between Jake and the Queen. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, humans are not property that can be owned by anyone. We are free beings who make our own choices about our lives." Queen Zerathil turned her glowing eyes toward Captain Harper and tilted her head slightly. Her crystalline features seemed to shift and change as she studied the human captain. "When?" She spoke. Her voice carried strange musical tones that made Jake feel dizzy. "Free beings," she repeated the words as if she was tasting something new. "This is an interesting concept. Your species speaks of freedom, yet you follow the orders of your captain. You submit to the laws of your government. You are bound by the needs of your physical bodies. How is this freedom different from belonging?" Jake found that he could move again, and he stepped out from behind Captain Harper. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself to stand straight and look directly at the Queen. "Your Majesty, I am honored that you have taken notice of me, but Captain Harper is right. I am not anyone's property. I belong to myself." A sound like breaking glass filled the air, and Jake realized that Queen Zerathil was laughing. The other aliens in the room began making various noises of shock and fear. Apparently nobody had ever spoken to the Voidborn Queen in such a direct way before. "Fascinating," she said, as her form became more solid and took on a shape that was almost human, but much taller and more graceful. "You acknowledge my title and show proper respect, yet you assert your independence. You do not cower in terror, yet you do not attack me with arrogance. Your mind works in patterns I have not encountered before." She began to circle around Jake slowly, and he felt like a mouse being studied by a very large cat. Her movements were smooth and fluid, but there was something predatory about the way she moved. As she walked, her form shifted between crystal and light, and sometimes she seemed to disappear entirely, only to reappear somewhere else. "Tell me, small human, what is your name, and what is your purpose among the stars?" "My name is Jake Collins," he said, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "I am a xenobiologist, which means I study different forms of life. I try to understand how life develops on different worlds and how different species adapt to their environments." Queen Zerathil stopped moving and stood directly in front of him again. "You study life itself. You seek to understand the patterns that connect all living things across the galaxy. This explains much about why you interest me." She turned to address the thousands of aliens who were watching this strange conversation. "I invoke the right of singular fascination. This human will accompany me so that I may learn more about his species and their unique way of thinking." An immediate uproar filled the hall as different alien leaders began shouting in dozens of different languages. Jake could not understand most of what was being said, but he could tell that many of them were upset or confused by the Queen's announcement. Captain Harper grabbed Jake's arm and pulled him closer to her. "What is the right of singular fascination?" she demanded of the nearest alien, who looked like a walking tree with golden leaves. The tree creature's voice sounded like wind blowing through branches. "It is an ancient law that allows any of the great powers to claim a representative from a developing species for cultural exchange. The chosen individual must live among the claiming species and learn their ways while teaching them about his own people. It has not been used for over 1,000 years. Jake felt his stomach drop. "How long does this exchange last?" "Until the great power decides they have learned enough," the tree creature replied. "It could be years or decades or centuries. The Voidborn are immortal, so time has little meaning to them." Captain Harper's face turned red with anger. "This is ridiculous. We demand a formal hearing before the Galactic Council. Humans are not members of your ancient agreements. We should not be bound by laws we never agreed to follow." But the other alien leaders were already conferring among themselves. After several minutes of discussion, a creature that looked like a living statue made of silver stepped forward. "The right of singular fascination predates the current Galactic Council by thousands of years. It is older than most of our civilizations and is considered sacred law. The invocation is legal and binding." Jake looked around the room and saw that some aliens seemed excited by what was happening, while others looked worried or afraid. He realized that this was probably the first time in centuries that Queen Zerathil had shown interest in anything or anyone. Her choosing him was apparently as shocking to them as it was to him. "I need to think about this," Jake said quietly. "Queen." Zerathil moved closer to him, and when she spoke, her voice seemed to come from inside his own head. "There is nothing to think about, small human. The law has been invoked and cannot be changed. You will come with me to my ship, and you will remain there until I decide otherwise." But Jake surprised everyone, including himself, by shaking his head. "No, Your Majesty. I understand that your law gives you the right to claim me, but I still have the right to choose how I respond. If I come with you, I come as a willing participant, not as a prisoner. I come as a representative of humanity, not as your property. The Queen stared at him for a long moment, and Jake was sure that she was about to turn him into dust with some terrible alien power. Instead, her crystalline features formed what might have been a smile. "Acceptable," she said. "You will reside aboard my vessel, the Eternal Resonance. You will learn our ways and teach us about yours. You will be treated as an honored guest, not as a captive. But make no mistake, Jake Collins, you cannot leave until I permit it." Captain Harper looked like she wanted to argue more, but Jake put his hand on her shoulder. "It's all right, Lisa. Maybe this is exactly what humanity needs. If I can build a relationship with the Voidborn Empire, it could help our people in ways we can't even imagine right now. But Jake," she said with tears in her eyes, "we don't know anything about them. They could be planning to study you like a laboratory specimen. They could hurt you or worse." Jake looked back at Queen Zerathil, who was watching their conversation with obvious interest. "I don't think she wants to hurt me, Captain. I think she's genuinely curious about humans and how we think. This could be the greatest opportunity for learning that anyone has ever had." The Queen gestured with one graceful hand, and the air around them began to shimmer. "It is time to go, Jake Collins. My ship is waiting, and there is much for you to see and learn." Jake hugged Captain Harper quickly and whispered in her ear, "Tell Earth what happened here. Let them know that I'm trying to build a bridge between our species. I'll find a way to send messages when I can." As he stepped away from his captain and toward Queen Zerathil, the shimmering air wrapped around both of them like a warm blanket. The last thing Jake saw before they disappeared was the shocked faces of thousands of alien beings, all staring at the spot where they had been standing. He had no idea what was going to happen to him next, but for the first time since this all began, he felt excited rather than afraid. He was about to become the first human to live among the most mysterious and powerful species in the galaxy. Whatever happened, it was going to be the adventure of a lifetime. The sensation of being transported to Queen Zerathil's ship was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. One moment he was standing in the crystal hall, surrounded by thousands of alien beings, and the next moment he found himself in a room that seemed to exist in several dimensions at the same time. The walls around him appeared to be made of flowing energy that changed colors constantly. Sometimes they looked solid like normal metal walls, but then they would become transparent, and Jake could see through them into other rooms that seemed impossibly far away. The floor beneath his feet felt solid enough, but it had a strange quality that made him feel like he was floating. Queen Zerathil stood beside him, looking completely at ease in this bizarre environment. Her crystalline form had become more solid now, and she almost looked like a very tall human woman made of living diamond. "Welcome to the Eternal Resonance, Jake Collins. This ship has been my home for over 3,000 years. Jake tried to look around and take in everything he was seeing, but it was overwhelming. "How is this possible?" he asked. "The walls seem to exist in multiple places at the same time. Your species thinks in terms of single dimensions," she explained as she began walking toward what might have been a doorway. "You see length and width and height and believe that is all there is. But reality has many more layers than your limited perception can grasp. This ship exists partially in your normal space and partially in what we call the resonance dimension." As they walked through the ship, Jake saw other members of the Voidborn species for the first time. They were all tall and graceful like their queen, but each one looked slightly different. Some appeared to be made of crystal, like Zerathil, while others looked like they were formed from pure light or flowing water. Most strange of all, some of them seemed to fade in and out of existence, as if they could not decide whether to be visible or invisible. "How many of your people live on this ship?" Jake asked as they passed a group of Voidborn who were doing something. That might have been dancing, or might have been some kind of work. It was impossible for him to tell the difference. "Numbers are not meaningful to us in the way they are to you. Queen Zarathiel replied. We exist in multiple probability states simultaneously. Sometimes there are a dozen of us aboard this vessel, and sometimes there are thousands. It depends on which version of reality you are observing at any given moment. Jake felt a headache starting behind his eyes. The concepts she was describing were so far beyond human understanding that his brain was struggling to process them. I think I need to sit down for a minute. The Queen gestured with her hand, and a chair formed out of the flowing energy of the wall. As Jake sat down, the chair adjusted itself to perfectly fit his human body. Your quarters have been prepared, she said. They are designed to accommodate your physical needs while allowing you to gradually adapt to our way of existence. She led him through several more corridors that seemed to bend and twist in ways that defied the laws of physics. Finally, they arrived at a room that looked surprisingly normal compared to the rest of the ship. There was a bed that looked like it would be comfortable for a human to sleep in. There was a desk and chair that seemed sized appropriately for him. There was even what appeared to be a window that showed the stars outside. How did you know how to make this room suitable for humans? Jake asked. We have been observing your species for some time, Queen Zarathiel admitted. When humans first began traveling between the stars, we became curious about you. You are unlike any other species we have encountered. Most civilizations follow predictable patterns of development, but humans seem to create chaos wherever they go. Jake was not sure if that was meant as a compliment or an insult. Chaos can sometimes lead to innovation and growth. Indeed, she said, and her crystalline features formed what was definitely a smile this time. That is precisely why you interest us. We Void-born have achieved perfect order and perfect knowledge. We can see all possible futures, and we understand the fundamental nature of reality itself. But in achieving this perfection, we have lost something that your species still possesses. What have you lost? Queen Zarathiel was quiet for a long moment, and Jake could see her form shifting between different states, as if she was thinking deeply about his question. Surprise, she finally said. Wonder, the joy of discovering something unexpected. When you know everything that is possible to know, existence becomes merely a matter of selecting which predetermined path to follow. Jake began to understand why she had chosen him. You want to learn how to experience uncertainty again. Perhaps, she said. Or perhaps I simply want to understand how a species that knows so little can seem so alive, while we who know everything feel so empty. Over the following days, Jake settled into a routine aboard the Eternal Resonance. Each morning, he would wake up to find that his room had changed slightly during the night. The walls might be a different color, or the furniture might have rearranged itself. At first, this was disturbing, but he gradually came to find it interesting. Rather than frightening, Queen Zarathiel would visit him every day, and they would talk for hours about the differences between human and void-born perspectives on life. She was fascinated by human emotions, especially the negative ones like fear and sadness and anger. To her, these seemed like fascinating experiences, rather than unpleasant problems to be avoided. Your species experiences pain, she said during one of their conversations, yet you do not seek to eliminate it entirely from your existence. Why do you choose to suffer when you could find ways to avoid suffering? Jake thought about this question carefully. I think pain and sadness serve important purposes for humans. They help us understand what we value by showing us what it feels like to lose it. They motivate us to change things that are wrong with our lives or our world. And they make the good times more meaningful by contrast. Fascinating, she replied. We eliminated suffering from our existence millions of years ago. We considered it an inefficiency that prevented us from achieving our full potential. But did eliminating suffering also eliminate joy? Jake asked. The Queen's form flickered and went through several rapid changes before stabilizing again. We do not experience joy in the way you describe it. We experience satisfaction when we achieve our goals, and we experience harmony when all things are in their proper order. But the intense emotional experiences you call happiness or excitement or love are unknown to us. Jake realized that in trying to perfect themselves, the Voidborn had accidentally removed the very things that made existence meaningful. They had become incredibly powerful and knowledgeable, but they had lost the ability to truly enjoy their own existence. Would you like to try experiencing emotions the way humans do? He asked carefully. Queen Zarathil stared at him for a long time. Is such a thing possible? I don't know, Jake admitted. But we could try some simple experiments. I could show you things that make humans happy or excited and see if you can learn to feel those emotions too. The idea seemed to intrigue her greatly. What would such experiments involve? Jake smiled and gestured toward the strange window in his room. Well, for starters, we could try experiencing the simple pleasure of watching a beautiful sunset without trying to analyze the scientific principles behind it. Just enjoying it for its own sake. Queen Zarathil moved to stand beside him at the window. We are currently traveling through a system with a young star that produces particularly intense light patterns. From a scientific perspective, the electromagnetic radiation creates interesting interference patterns in the solar wind. Stop, Jake said gently. Don't think about the science. Just look at the colors and let yourself feel whatever comes naturally. They stood together in silence, watching the swirling patterns of light and color outside the ship. Jake could see Queen Zarathil's reflection in the window, and he noticed that her form was becoming more stable and solid as she focused on the simple act of observation. It is, she said quietly. Beautiful. Yes, it is. Jake agreed. For the first time since he had met her, Queen Zarathil seemed to be experiencing something purely for the joy of experiencing it rather than as a source of information to be analyzed and cataloged. As the weeks passed, Jake noticed remarkable changes happening throughout the ship. Queen Zarathil was spending more and more time in her solid crystalline form rather than shifting between dimensions. She had begun asking him questions about concepts that the Voidborn had apparently never considered before, such as friendship and hope and the meaning of laughter. The other members of her species were clearly disturbed by these changes. Jake often saw groups of them gathered in the corridors speaking in their musical language, with tones that sounded worried or upset. Sometimes they would stop talking abruptly when they noticed him approaching, and he could feel their strange, multidimensional eyes watching him with what seemed like suspicion or fear. One day, while Jake was in his room reading a book about human history on a device Queen Zarathil had provided for him, a tall Voidborn male materialized directly through the wall. Unlike the Queen, his form was constantly shifting between different states, and Jake found it difficult to look at him directly without getting dizzy. I am Commander Veltar, he said in a voice that seemed to come from several directions at once. I serve as the Queen's primary advisor and have done so for over 2,000 years. We must speak immediately. Jake set down his reading device and stood up to face the alien commander. What can I do for you, Commander? You can explain what you have done to our Queen, Veltar said, and his form crackled with energy that made the air in the room feel electric. Since your arrival, she has begun exhibiting behaviors that are completely contrary to our nature. She spends hours staring at simple visual phenomena without gathering any useful data. She asks questions about concepts that serve no logical purpose. Most disturbing of all, she has begun limiting herself to single probability states for extended periods. Jake tried to remain calm, even though the commander's presence was making him very nervous. Queen Zarathil asked me to teach her about human perspectives. I've been showing her how we experience things like beauty and wonder. I thought that was what she wanted. What she wants and what is good for her are not the same thing. Veltar replied angrily. The Voidborn achieved our current level of existence by transcending the limitations that still bind lesser species. Emotions and uncertainty and linear thinking are weaknesses that we evolved beyond millions of years ago. You are causing her to regress to a more primitive state. Maybe what you call primitive, I would call alive, Jake said before he could stop. Himself, the commander's form flared with bright light, and Jake felt a wave of energy that made his skin tingle painfully. You dare to suggest that we are not alive? We are the most advanced species in the galaxy. We possess knowledge and abilities that your kind cannot even imagine. We have conquered death itself and exist in perfect harmony with the fundamental forces of the universe. But are you happy? Jake asked quietly. Veltar's form stabilized into something almost solid, and Jake could see features that might have been a face filled with confusion. Happy, he repeated the word as if it was in a foreign language. Happiness is a chemical reaction in primitive brains designed to reward behaviors that increase survival chances. It serves no purpose for beings who have transcended the need for survival. And why does Queen Zarathiel seem so interested in learning about it? The commander was quiet for a long moment, and Jake could see his energy form cycling through different patterns. That is what concerns us, he finally said. For the first time in her existence, our queen is questioning the path our people have chosen. She speaks of experiencing linear time as you do. She has suggested that perhaps perfect knowledge is less desirable than the possibility of discovery. Jake began to understand the scope of what was happening. His presence on the ship was not just changing Queen Zarathiel personally, but was causing her to question the fundamental philosophy that had guided the Voidborn civilization for millions of years. Commander, he said carefully, maybe change isn't always a bad thing. Even for a species as advanced as yours, there might still be room for growth and new experiences. Growth, Veltar said the word with obvious disgust. We completed our growth eons ago. We achieved perfection and have maintained it ever since. What you call growth, we call decay and regression. But if you're perfect, then why did Queen Zarathiel choose to bring me here? Jake asked. Perfect. Beings wouldn't need to learn anything new from a primitive species like humans. This question seemed to disturb the commander greatly. His form flickered rapidly between dozens of different states before he managed to stabilize himself again. The Queen has always been curious about anomalies and paradoxes. Your species represents the greatest paradox we have encountered. You should have destroyed yourselves centuries ago through warfare and environmental destruction, yet somehow you continue to survive and even thrive. She wanted to understand how this was possible, and what has she learned? That is the problem. Veltar admitted. Instead of analyzing your species objectively, she has begun to adopt your ways of thinking. She is becoming infected with human concepts like individuality and emotional attachment and temporal limitation. Jake realized that the commander was genuinely afraid. The Voidborn had built their entire civilization on the idea that they had found the perfect way to exist, and now their queen was suggesting that maybe they had been wrong. What will happen if she continues to change? If the queen fully adopts human thought patterns, she will lose her ability to perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously. Veltar explained. She will become trapped in linear time like you are. She will experience uncertainty and vulnerability and all the other weaknesses that plague lesser species. Most importantly, she will no longer be able to lead our people effectively. Maybe she could learn to be a different kind of leader, Jake suggested. One who rules through inspiration rather than pure logical authority. The commander's form flared with energy again. Impossible. The Voidborn Empire spans 17 star systems and contains billions of beings. It requires perfect coordination and flawless decision-making to function. A leader who experiences doubt or emotional attachment would bring chaos and destruction to everything we have built. Jake could see the genuine concern in Veltar's strange alien features. From his perspective, the Queen was destroying herself and potentially endangering their entire civilization by learning to think and feel like a human. "What do you want me to do?" Jake asked. "Convince her to stop this foolish experiment," the commander said. "Show her that human ways of thinking are inferior to our own. Help her remember why the Voidborn chose to transcend these primitive mental states in the first place. And if I refuse," Veltar's form became very still and solid, "then we will be forced to remove you from the ship permanently. The Queen may have invoked ancient law to bring you here, but there are other ancient laws that allow us to protect her from harmful influences, even against her own wishes." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you threatening to kill me?" "I am explaining the consequences of your continued interference with our Queen's proper mental state," the commander replied. "We do not wish to harm you, Jake Collins, but we will not allow you to destroy everything our people have worked to achieve over millions of years." After Veltar disappeared through the wall again, Jake sat on his bed and tried to think through this impossible situation. Queen Zarathiel was learning to experience wonder and joy for the first time in her existence. But her own people saw this as a dangerous corruption that threatened their entire way of life. He realized that he was caught in the middle of a conflict that was much bigger than just one alien queen's curiosity about human emotions. The future of one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations might depend on whether Zarathiel continued down this path of discovery or returned to her previous state of perfect but emotionless existence. Jake had no idea what the right choice was, but he knew that whatever happened next would change both the Voidborn Empire and humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The next morning Jake woke to find Queen Zarathiel waiting for him in his room. Her crystalline form was more solid than he had ever seen it before, and for the first time she looked almost completely human, except for the way light moved through her transparent skin. "Commander Veltar spoke with you yesterday," she said, and it was a statement rather than a question. "I could sense his distress from across the ship. My people are afraid of what I am becoming." Jake sat up in his bed and looked at her carefully. "Are you afraid too?" "Yes," she admitted, and the simple honesty of her answer surprised him. "For the first time in millions of years, I am experiencing uncertainty about the future. I do not know what will happen to me or to my people if I continue down this path you have shown me. But I also know that I cannot return to the empty existence I had before." She moved to the window and gazed out at the stars with an expression that Jake was learning to recognize as wonder. "Last night I did something I have never done before. I chose to experience linear time for several hours. I forced myself to perceive only the present moment without seeing all the possible futures that might branch out from it. How did it feel?" "Terrifying," she said immediately, "but also exhilarating. Every moment contained possibilities that I had to discover rather than simply observe. Every decision felt meaningful because I could not see all of its consequences in advance. It was like being blind and able to see at the same time." Jake got out of bed and joined her at the window. "That's what it's like to be human all the time. We never know for certain what's going to happen next, so every choice we make feels important. My advisors believe this uncertainty will make me a poor leader," Queen Zarathiel said. "They think I will make mistakes that could harm our people or our empire. Perhaps they are correct, or perhaps you'll make decisions that consider not just logical outcomes, but also the emotional needs of your people," Jake suggested. "Maybe uncertainty will help you become a better leader rather than a worse one." The Queen turned to look at him, and Jake could see something in her strange eyes that he had never seen before. It took him a moment to realize what it was, but then he understood that she was looking at him with affection. Not just curiosity or scientific interest, but genuine care for him as an individual. "Jake Collins," she said softly, "you have given me the greatest gift anyone has ever offered. You have shown me what it means to truly experience existence, rather than simply observing it from outside. But I fear that accepting this gift fully may destroy everything my people have built. What if there was a way to find a balance?" Jake asked, "What if you could keep your advanced abilities while also learning to experience emotions and uncertainty? Is such a thing possible?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but we could try to find out together." Queen Zarathil was quiet for a long time, and